He became the morning star, the herald of each new day, the promise that light would always return. When people awoke to the dawn and saw that bright point upon the horizon, they whispered, "He watches. He remembers." The priests built no more temples of blood. Instead, they taught their children to breathe with the rhythm of the wind, to honor life in every breath, as he once taught. The world learned again that divinity is not in sacrifice, but in remembrance. And in that remembrance, Quetzalcoatl lived on. As the sun rose higher, his voice echoed faintly across the sky. "I am the wind that carries your song. I am the memory that never fades." The earth exhaled, the rivers sighed, and even the shadows bowed. The day began, gentle, bright, eternal. And in that dawn, the feathered sky was born. Long before the sun first rose, before men knew how to speak or dream, there was only the whisper of the wind and the endless sky. From the breath of the cosmos and the heartbeat of the earth came two brothers, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, and Tezcatlipoca, the shadow in the mirror. Quetzalcoatl was light, a god of wind, wisdom, and creation. His scales shimmered like emeralds and jade, and feathers of white and gold trailed behind him as he glided between stars. Wherever he moved, the world took shape. Rivers found their course, mountains rose from the dust, and the sky learned to sing. Tezcatlipoca was darkness, the reflection of all that light feared to see. He carried obsidian mirrors through which he could gaze upon truth and deceit alike. His laughter echoed like thunder, and his eyes burned with the power of chaos. Together they danced the first dance of balance. Light and shadow, wind and fire, creation and destruction. Each needed the other. Yet balance is fragile and gods are seldom patient. One day, as the brothers walked upon the still waters of the primordial sea, Tezcatlipoca said, "Brother, let us make a place for life, a world where our thoughts may take form." Quetzalcoatl smiled. "Yes, let us make a home for song and breath." And so, they reached into the deep and lifted the bones of the old world. From these ancient remains they shaped mountains and valleys, calling upon the great crocodile Serpent to rise from the abyss. The creature's body became the land, its tears became rivers, and its breath became mist. But Serpent was wild and full of hunger. When the gods tore her apart to make the earth, her rage shook the heavens. From her cries were born earthquakes, storms, and the pulse of the planet, reminders that creation always carries pain. When their work was done, Quetzalcoatl looked upon the world and saw it was beautiful, a fragile dream of green and gold suspended between sky and sea. He breathed upon it, and the first wind swept across the land. Leaves trembled, waves sparkled, and the air whispered his name. From the dust and the bones of the old gods, he shaped the first people, being small and uncertain, but full of potential. He bent low and gave them the breath of life, a spark of his own spirit. They opened their eyes and gazed upon the sun, seeing beauty for the first time. Tezcatlipoca watched and laughed. "You give them breath, brother, but you cannot keep it. They will forget you, as all things forget their makers." Quetzalcoatl's voice was calm. "Then let them forget. What matters is that they live, and that they learn to remember." And so began the first age of men, the age of the wind. The world was new, and its songs were gentle. But even as the people grew and sang, Tezcatlipoca's words lingered in the air like distant thunder. For in the heart of every creation lies the seed of its ending. As centuries passed, Quetzalcoatl descended among his people, walking as a man, teaching them to craft, to write, to dream. He taught them how to read the stars, how to build temples that reach toward heaven, and how to speak to the gods through song instead of sacrifice. They loved him. They called him the morning star, the bringer of dawn. But beyond the mountains, in the realm of shadows, Tezcatlipoca watched and waited. For where light grows, shadow always follows. The wind carried Quetzalcoatl's whisper across the valleys and jungles of the world. The people flourished under his teachings. They wove, painted, built, and dreamed. The god of wind walked among them, not as a ruler but as a teacher. He sat with the elders, listened to the children, and taught that life was sacred because it was borrowed from the breath of the gods. He told them, "When you breathe, remember, the air is my spirit. Treat it kindly, and it will carry your prayers." Under his guidance, cities rose like flowers in the desert. Temples gleamed with white stone, and songs of gratitude echoed from mountain to sea. The world was alive with balance, but balance, as always, trembled. Far to the west, Tezcatlipoca watched in the reflection of his obsidian mirror. The laughter of humankind, their peace and joy, were salt in his wounds. "My brother builds a paradise," he muttered, "but paradise breeds pride." And so the shadow began to whisper into the dreams of mortals. He appeared to kings as a golden jaguar, promising them eternal power. To priests, he came as a voice of thunder, demanding sacrifice. The seeds of fear took root, and the temples that once honored light began to thirst for blood. Quetzalcoatl felt the shift in the air. The wind grew heavy. The songs grew darker. He climbed to the highest mountain, where the stars burned like eyes, and called to the heavens, "Father Sky, why do they turn from me?" But the sky was silent. He descended once more to his people and saw what had become of them. In the city of Tallinn, where once peace had reigned, altars now ran red. The air was thick with smoke and sorrow. He entered a temple and found his own statue, covered not in flowers, but in hearts freshly torn from the living. He wept, and the wind itself began to cry with him. That night he spoke to the people from the steps of the temple. "You have forgotten the breath that gave you life. You worship death and call it devotion. The gods do not hunger as you do." But his words fell upon deaf ears. The priests feared losing their power. The kings feared losing their control. And in the silence of that fear, Tezcatlipoca laughed. "Let me show you, brother," the shadow whispered to the wind. "Let me show you how fragile your peace truly is." The next day, Quetzalcoatl dreamed, a dream not of his own making. In it, he saw himself drunk on sacred wine, his temple in ruins, his people mocking him. He saw himself fleeing across the sea, a serpent devoured by his own reflection. When he woke, his heart trembled, for gods, too, can doubt. Tezcatlipoca appeared before him, his eyes like black fire. "Brother," he said smoothly, "you have done enough. Rest. Feast with your people one last time." Though wary, Quetzalcoatl agreed. That night, Tezcatlipoca offered him a cup of pulque, the drink of the gods, strong and sweet. "Only one sip," he said, smiling, "for old time's sake." The feathered serpent drank, and the world began to blur. The stars spun above him, and the air grew heavy. He laughed, he sang, he stumbled through the temple, and in his drunken haze, he saw his reflection in the obsidian mirror. What he saw broke him. The image was not divine. It was monstrous, his face twisted, his feathers blackened, his eyes hollow. "This is you," the shadow whispered. "This is what you have become." In shame and horror, Quetzalcoatl fell to his knees. The wind stilled. "I am not worthy of the world I made," he whispered. "I am not worthy of breath itself." And with dawn he vanished from Talon. The people searched, but he was gone. His temples fell silent, his name carried only by the fading wind. The golden age of peace ended as swiftly as it had begun. Yet even in his sorrow, Quetzalcoatl's spirit lingered in the air. Every breeze that touched the mountains, every sigh that left the lips of the living, still carried a trace of his breath. For though he had fallen, the gift remained. The sun rose over Talon once more, but its light felt hollow. The songs of joy had become whispers of fear. Without Quetzalcoatl's guidance, the people built in his memory. Taller temples, richer offerings, brighter jewels. Yet all of it felt empty, like a heart still beating after the soul has gone. The city glittered like a jewel in the valley, its towers catching the first light of dawn. But beneath the gold and stone, shadows moved. Priests wore the feathers of the feathered serpent, but their prayers were for power, not peace. Kings claimed to speak with gods, but their voices trembled with greed. Still, they remembered Quetzalcoatl's teachings in fragments, the writing, the crafts, the songs. They built statues of jade and obsidian, their eyes turned toward the east, waiting for their god to return with the morning star. Every dawn, the horizon shimmered, and the people whispered, "Perhaps today," but the horizon remained silent. Far away, beyond the deserts and mountains, Quetzalcoatl wandered in exile. His once radiant feathers were dulled by dust, his steps light as drifting wind. He had walked across plains where the sand sang, across forests that whispered old names. Yet no place brought him peace. The wind carried his own sorrow back to him. One night, he climbed a high hill overlooking a valley filled with golden light. The stars above burned in quiet witness as he spoke to the wind. "What is a god without his people? What is breath without those who listen?" The wind did not answer, but it moved gently around him, as if in comfort. He dreamt again, this time, of a city built of pure gold, shining like the sun itself. In that dream, he walked among people who remembered the old ways, who offered flowers instead of blood, who sang instead of screamed. And at the heart of the city stood a great temple, not to worship power, but to honor balance. When he woke, the dream lingered like dawn light on water. "I will build it," he said softly, "not in stone, but in spirit." He gathered the scattered tribes of the south, wanderers, weavers, those who had fled the cruelty of other gods, and taught them again. "Build not for me," he told them, "but for the breath that connects all life." Under his guidance, they created gardens that sang with color, canals that mirrored the sky, and homes filled with laughter. They named their city Talon of the Dawn, the City of Gold. But this gold was not of metal, it was the glow of sunrise upon peace. For a time the world was gentle again. Yet Tezcatlipoca, ever watchful, saw this light rising once more, his mirror clouded with envy. "He builds again what should have fallen," he hissed. "Then let the fire take it." He summoned the winds of destruction, hurricanes that tore through valleys, fires that devoured forests. The rivers flooded, and mountains roared. The people cried out for their god, but Quetzalcoatl stood before the storm and said, "If this is the test, Then let me be the sacrifice. He spread his wings, shining like dawn against the chaos. The winds struck him, the fire burned him, yet still he stood. The storm howled until the world itself grew tired. When the silence returned, Talon was gone. Only ashes and sand remained. Quetzalcoatl knelt in the ruins, the feathers of his wings falling like autumn leaves. All things born of light must pass through darkness, he whispered. Even I. And from those ashes he took a single feather, pale as the morning star, and cast it to the east. Let it rise when I return, he said. The wind carried it upward, and the feather vanished into the sky. From that day on, when the people looked east and saw the bright star before sunrise, they said, "He has not left us. He shines to remind the world that gold is not the sun, but the soul." The world remembers light, but it worships shadow. So it was with the feathered serpent. After the fall of Talon, the people wandered, carrying fragments of his wisdom but none of his peace. They built new temples, raised idols, and prayed to echoes. Some called his name, others cursed it. In the absence of their god, his image became their cage. And far beyond their sight, Quetzalcoatl drifted through lands unmarked by map or memory. The air around him no longer shimmered with color. His feathers, once radiant, now gray with dust. He wandered through deserts where the sand hissed like snakes and mountains that whispered forgotten songs. The wind that once obeyed him now blew aimlessly, untamed. He came upon a mirror lying half-buried in the earth. Obsidian, black as night. When he touched it, it trembled, and Tezcatlipoca's voice coiled from within. "Brother," it hissed, "you cannot flee your reflection." Quetzalcoatl looked into the mirror and saw the world, not as he wished it to be, but as it had become. The rivers ran thick with blood. The temples echoed with screams. Men built towers not to praise the heavens but to climb above their neighbors. His breath, once pure, now carried smoke. "I gave them life," he whispered. "I gave them the wind itself." Tezcatlipoca laughed softly. "And in giving you made them desire more. You taught them to dream but not to wake. You are not their savior, brother. You are their temptation." Quetzalcoatl turned away, but the words clung to him like ash. He walked until he reached the sea, vast, endless, shimmering like molten gold. There he fell to his knees, and the wind circled him, whispering fragments of forgotten prayers. "Am I still worthy of the sky?" he asked. No answer came. So he built a pyre upon the shore, a great mound of wood and feather, stone and memory. As the sun descended, he laid himself upon it. "If I am no longer the wind," he said, "then let me be the fire that frees it." He struck the flame. The night burned bright, brighter than the stars. The sea caught his reflection and shone with it. His feathers ignited, each one a spark carried skyward. The smoke rose, twisting, shimmering, and from within it, a single light emerged. It climbed higher, through clouds and shadow, until it became a star. The people far inland saw it and fell to their knees. "He has risen," they cried. "Quetzalcoatl lives. He has become the morning star." And so, in death, the feathered serpent ascended once more, not as flesh, but as light. His fire became the dawn. His breath became the breeze that greeted every morning. Tezcatlipoca watched from his mirror and said, "You cannot destroy what was born from the wind, for even shadow understood that light, once given, never truly dies. And every morning since, when the first star fades before sunrise, the wind stirs gently through the world, carrying a whisper soft as prayer. I am not gone. I have only changed. After the fire faded, the feathered serpent was no more, at least, not in form. His light had ascended to the heavens, but his spirit drifted downward, into the shadowed depths beneath the earth. For even gods must pass through darkness to rise again. There lies Mictlan, the underworld, a realm without sun, ruled by Quetzalcoatl, the skeletal lord of death, and his silent queen, Quetzalcoatl. It was said that no one could leave Mictlan once they entered, not even the gods. But Quetzalcoatl's journey was not one of death, but of remembrance. He descended through the 9 layers of shadow, each colder and darker than the last. The first was the River of Dogs, where lost souls wandered, calling for the companions that once guided them. The second was the Mountain of Blades, its slopes sharp as sorrow. The third was the Field of Winds, where the screams of the forgotten howled like storms. And still he walked. At the 4th layer the world grew silent. There, beneath a sky of stone, Quetzalcoatl met the Lord of Death. Quetzalcoatl sat upon a throne of skulls, his eyes hollow and endless. His voice was a whisper that shook the ground. Feathered one, he said, you have no place here. The living and the divine are not welcome in my halls. Quetzalcoatl bowed his head. I come not to steal, but to remember. The world above is broken, its heart hollow. I seek the bones of the first people, that life may begin anew. The death god laughed, a sound like cracking ice. You would take from death to give to life? Yes, said the serpent. For without memory, there can be no rebirth. Quetzalcoatl leaned forward, his grin widening. Then prove yourself. Cross my realm without losing your light. And so began the trial. He walked through rivers of blood and fields of shadows that tried to swallow his form. Spirits clung to him, whispering doubt. You failed them, they said. Your light was wasted. But Quetzalcoatl kept walking. For each step he took, a faint wind followed, the breath of life itself, refusing to die. When he reached the deepest chamber, he found the bones of those who came before. They glowed faintly, pulsing with a rhythm older than time. He gathered them carefully and began to climb. But Quetzalcoatl was not content to let him go. No one leaves Mictlan unbroken, he roared, sending his minions after the feathered serpent. The earth trembled. Shadows clawed at him. Yet even as the darkness tore at his wings, Quetzalcoatl whispered, I am the breath between life and death. You cannot cage the wind. With one final surge of light, he broke through the surface. The bones in his arms turned to dust, then to flowers, then to the first heartbeat of a newborn world. He had done it. He had carried death into life and life into death. The cycle was whole again. Above, the morning star blazed brighter than ever before. The people looked to the sky and felt the wind upon their faces, soft and alive. And in that wind, they heard a whisper. Even in the underworld, I did not stop breathing. The underworld faded behind him, and the feathered serpent rose once more into the light. But he was not as he had been. His body was gone, his form now woven of wind and starlight, his voice a whisper carried by the breath of the world. He rose through clouds painted with dawn, his spirit trailing feathers of silver and gold. As he climbed, he looked down upon the earth, mountains glimmering like old memories, rivers winding like veins through the living body of the land. The people stirred, feeling a wind gentle and alive sweep across their faces. They did not know his name, but they felt his touch. From his ascent, Quetzalcoatl saw the sky divide, night and day meeting in a seamless glow. He heard the songs of those who still remembered him, faint but enduring, echoing from the valleys. Their faith had not died, even when their temples had crumbled. It lived in their breath, their dreams, their stories. And for the first time since his fall, Quetzalcoatl smiled. He spread his wings of light wide across the horizon. The air shimmered, and from his motion came color, crimson, gold, and pale jade. The world witnessed the first true sunrise, not born of fire, but of memory. High above, Tezcatlipoca watched through his mirror. The reflection no longer mocked him. It simply showed the truth, that shadow cannot exist without light. For a long moment, even the god of darkness was silent. Then, with a sigh that sounded almost like laughter, he whispered, "Fly then, brother. The sky is wide enough for both of us." And Quetzalcoatl did. He soared beyond the mountains, through the endless blue, his feathers scattering light like seeds. Where they fell, flowers bloomed, rivers sparkled, and the air sang. His wind moved through jungles and deserts, carrying balance where chaos had taken root.